there, and welcome to this new episode of the newly rebranded Design Lives Here, aka Isalotto Sessions. We are here to share knowledge, innovative ideas, and inspire. So if you enjoy our chats, please make sure you subscribe to this channel or follow us, like our videos, and why not even leave a wee comment. Thank you. We can't do this without your support. So let's dive into today's conversation. Hello and welcome to this new episode of Design Lives Here. A very special episode today. I've got 4 speakers. We're talking about nurturing leadership in the built environment. So, Rebecca, we all read the RIBA report, Build It Together, where it's actually quite depressing because it turns out not much has happened for the last 20 years, and we're still talking about the same issues we had 20 years ago.
Yeah, we are. In fact, I think that, as I mentioned before, I was hosting another panel today in the fire sector, talking about fire engineers and the same thing there as well. We've been talking about this for decades. For decades, we've had good intentions, we've had warm statements, but culture shifts are only happening or will only happen when we've got systems behind them. So it's no good just put performative targets on things. If the industry wants accountability, it really needs to start treating inclusion like safety, quality, and sustainability. It needs to be measured, it needs to be monitored, it needs to be really owned by leadership teams.
Gillian, we had this conversation, you and I, well, we have conversations all the time, but we discussed about this in the interview I did with you for the podcast. You've been around for a couple of years.
Quite a few decades, yes.
Do you agree with this RIBA report, or have you actually seen any changes?
I think there has been change. I've been working in design for 43 years now, so I've definitely seen a huge shift from what I experienced when I started, which was drawing boards an incredibly sexist working environment, and actually you kind of just had to try and just get on with it. But it's definitely changed through legislation, whether it's HR legislation and just generally the culture of recognizing that behavior had to shift and change. And it is better, but I think Rebecca's right, and it has to be lived and breathed and believed in by leadership. And some of our clients are doing it, some of our clients aren't, or they paid lip service to it. But I definitely have seen a positive change, but maybe it's just I'm just looking at it from a different standpoint to others because I have been around for quite a long time.
I've come from a different industry, but some of the same issues exist. And I think there has been some change. I'm not going to say that I don't think it's right to say that there hasn't been any, but I just think, one, it's not been probably the change that we are saying that there has been. It's not been at the rate that we're kind of purporting it to be. Because when you look at things like, women within the built environment, we're still only, people will give different statistics, but I think the actual statistics from the ONS, I think it's like 14% of women in the industry. And that kind of fluctuates around that mark. It's not changing.
Yeah.
And I think also you talk about sexism, misogyny, etc. I think that on the surface of it, no, it's not as maybe as bad as it was, but I still think it's quite baked into the systems and the structures that we've got. And so I think sometimes there's a lot of performative noise going on, and there's a lot of, we are doing this and we are doing that, but I still think there's a long way to go, kind of in terms of shifting the systems. I think we're still working from, I would kind of, the systems and the structures that we're working in still now are ones that were built 50, 60 years ago when the majority of the workforce was a single demographic and, I don't know, but
women couldn't get a bank account.
I was going to say that. I was just going to say that as well. It's only been since then really that we've started to see a shift, hasn't it? And that's quite recent history, isn't it? But we haven't changed any of the systems that we're working in. We're still the norm is to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. It's quite archaic. But then when you look at the education system, that is too. So
Emma, you work for one of the biggest practices in the UK, and you are an architect, so you might have a different perspective than Gillian, who's an interior designer. You don't have as You still have a very strong career and you've worked in some big projects. What is your take on this perspective?
So it's a great question. So I'm an associate director architect at BDP. I've been an architect, but been in this industry for 18 years. And I think when I started in the industry, I could see a lack of women ahead of me where I was going. And I naively believed at the time that that was entirely to do with that it would change over time. Because I could see that when I was a part one or when I was a part two, there was 50-50 women and men. And I just believed with all of my heart that that would follow itself up so that when I was more senior, it was bound to be 50-50. And what I've seen instead and lived through is a gradual drop off of women leaving the industry for myriad reasons, which are all sort of covered in the Fawcett report. And I think some of it is a real shame, actually, because I believe, like Gillian is saying, there are shifts. The men that I work with here in my studio, I think, are brilliant. I don't think that any of them are sexist guys or whatever, but we've still got a structure where there are very few women in senior roles. There's myself and another woman in the principal or director sort of strand, and everybody else is men. BDP are working towards changing that. So we've commissioned before the Fawcett Society report, actually, the Tall Wall did us a gender report, which was really helpful. And it's come up with some really practical suggestions of what the practice needs to do to address that balance. And I think we've got to be aware of that people have unconscious biases, or if something's not ingrained in somebody's lived experience, they don't necessarily see it. So what I've started to do and encourage my female colleagues to do, I think there's a communication gap, actually. So I think sometimes things happen to people, say on site, that they're frustrated with, and they assume that their male colleague has seen it and ignored it, whereas sometimes it might be that it just hasn't registered for that man that that's happened to that woman. And also, even if it has and it does, that doesn't necessarily give them permission to do something about it, because the other message is that we're powerful and we're in charge of our own destiny and we don't need people to step in and do things for us. So I think actually that balance of being an ally is a two-way relationship where women need to explain to men what they think they would like them to do, and actually communication, I think, will fix a lot of these issues, and just understanding what the issues are.
Caroline, you again, you've got a completely different perspective, because then you are in those management teams. You are there for Cushman Wakefield, director of the Northwest. When we discussed about this event here, and again, I refer back to this RIBA report when they say women are sometimes, they perceive or they're being asked to lead with a man style. But in reality, well, my personal experience is that that's counterproductive, because I'm not a man, so pretending to be a man doesn't work. But also, one of the things that you and I discussed is that a woman can bring something different to the pot.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I come at it from a property perspective. So on one level, you would expect it to be more extreme than certainly interior design or architecture potentially. I've been a partner within Cushman and Wakefield for just over 20 years. And when I became a partner quite young, I was one of two or three female partners around a table of 20 men. But the business has been very supportive of women. And I've got to a point now, 6 or 7 years ago, when I was asked to be head of the office. In that situation, there were still 20 odd partners round the table who were men. There were a few more females, but I was there in a position of being a woman who was able to lead the office in the way that she felt was appropriate. As you say, I was very conscious. I didn't want to manage the office as a man. I wanted to manage the office in the way I wanted to be, which was very focused around caring for the people who are working in the office. And I've tried to sort of live by that. But I think what I've seen in the property industry is trying to be much more flexible and recognizing, probably, if I'm honest, part of that's been driven by them recognizing that their clients are changing, that their clients are mixed, their clients aren't white, middle-aged men anymore, and they need to make sure that the people that are serving or working for their clients do offer diversity. So there has been a real commitment within our business and the sector more generally that we need to mirror society more and encouraging people, gender, but also minorities, ethnic minorities as well. So I have, it's not perfect, but I've basically seen a positive shift of people being much more aware of how we offer flexibility to encourage people. I think for me, one of the I sort of agree with what Emma had said in terms of seeing people and expecting it to get more balanced over time. The reality, I think, is we need to be able to make sure people have choices. And I've seen that some women have had children and chosen they don't want to prioritize work. And I think that's really important as well. So recognizing continue to have a career, they do want to have children. But in other cases, what's very positive is that better balance between partners bringing up children and sharing it rather than the expectation that the woman takes the lion's share.
Yeah, I totally agree on that one. We are all different. We all have different ambitions in life. So there is definitely a problem here for women that have got children and then they're struggling to return to the workforce. But as you say, it's not general. Some women just don't want to return to the workforce. So they deserve as much respect as the ones that actually go. Rebecca, this is another interesting point that Caroline touched now, diversity. We are doing a lot of talk about supporting women and the minorities, disabilities, and things like that. Is the white male actually missing out a bit too much? Because there is so much training and effort put into supporting what historically has been the more difficult categories of employees, but it started to become a bit detrimental on the white guys as well, isn't it?
So I just want to go back as well. Great question, but I do just want to rewind a little bit because I agree with you completely, Caroline. And there are women. We're all different. We all have different experiences. We all have different wants and needs, and often we don't know what we want to do until we have children, and our choices may change. But I just think that we need to just also remember that. I mean, I know I don't know everybody's kind of family situation here, but I know that I've made a choice to go back and and focus on my career, and I absolutely made that choice, and I own that choice. However, what I will say is that I have struggled behind the scenes, and it's been really, really difficult because of the systems that I was working in, and I think it's partly the reason why I left and why I've set up my own business as well. So I think you're right in absolutely in that everybody's different. Everybody has the right to make a choice, but I just think that we've still got quite a bit of work to do in terms of the systems and the structures and in enabling that. I mean, I was talking to somebody recently who was going off and having a baby. She's working for quite a large organisation, and she daren't tell her boss, that she's thinking about having a year off, when she has a baby. So it's like, it still exists. We still don't necessarily have. I mean, again, I think the changes are being made, and it obviously is organisation specific, but I still think there are things that we need to do to make sure that the women that do want to make the choice to go back to work is made easier for them, is all I'm trying to say. Because I still do think that there is a parenthood penalty. And it's the same for men as well. I also know of men who want to go back to more flexible working because they want to help with the childcare, and even they are coming across issues. So to bring it back to what you just said around, our men suffering. Yeah, they are, and I think that at the end of we've also got to remember that because we've got a lot of performative targets in place around gender, etc., and we want to see X amount of women in leadership positions, sometimes the wrong women are getting promoted. And yes, men are getting left behind. There are sometimes the wrong people in positions because of the performative nature of the targets that we're setting, is what I'm trying to say. And but that's not helping anybody, right? It's not just helping men, it's not helping women either. It's not helping the women that are in the positions that they shouldn't necessarily be in. And also then it'll be like, oh, that's another woman who couldn't handle it, right? And so I think that when we talk about it having a negative impact on men, let's say, we've got to think about actually how it's having a negative impact on everybody. So, the right approaches will if we're looking at how we can support more women to rise, how we can support neuro inclusion, how we can support just inclusion across the board, it's going to benefit everybody. It's not, we hear a lot about how we're going to support subsectors of the society, whereas we should be actually looking at, one approach that kind of includes everybody. And I think it comes back to what you were saying, Emma, about communication. It comes back to, breaking down barriers. It comes back to just that human connection and that ability to have conversation, which has become really, really difficult in a world where everybody's terrified of a HR issue, Sorry, I'm very passionate about it.
Gillian, when we were celebrating the 10th anniversary of your Glasgow studio for MLA, one of the things that came up, and then you and Gordon, was your co-director for the studio, were very keen to talk about, was hire somebody that is smarter than you. Take task for the job.
Yeah. And don't feel that you're going to be outshone by someone, because actually the fact that you hired them show you have the vision and you can recognize the skills that they have and how that they can benefit the business. And I think, Emma, you were totally dead on when you're talking about communication. And there's something also about the critical mass of an organization that allows it to still feel like family. So you actually can have meaningful and supportive conversations easily. And it was something we touched on with a client down here yesterday. And they had an aspiration to not grow above a certain 200 people, because then it's no longer feels like family. You no longer know everybody's name and a bit about them. And I suppose my firm, MLA, in total, we're probably about 80. We've got 4 in Manchester, we've got 20 odd in Glasgow and the rest in Edinburgh. So that we are quite a good size to actually maintain these relationships. So it's a bit of relationships, but also, absolutely hire somebody that's better than you, because you'll rise in their success. And I've seen that in a number of different employers that I've worked for in the past. And then they build their own team and they continue to invest in talent.
Emma, you worked in a very unique environment, which was the Nightingale COVID Hospital in Manchester. We hosted a beautiful panel at the Halle St. Peter's a few years ago with during Design Pop-Up, and you very kindly put together all the heads of this big team you work with. And I remember the mayor from the army that kept you all under strict instructions. You've got 10 seconds to make a decision that would normally takes you 1 month. What is your take? That's a completely different style of leadership than what you normally work with. How was that? Better, worse, just different?
So it was really interesting. It's a really good question. I think for context, there was a design program for that project, which was in hours instead of weeks and days. And it was literally being run by the army. So it was being run by a military position. They had 2 client meetings a day, one at 10 a.m. and one at 3 p.m. And we were allowed to attend those, actually. That was part of how they ran it. So they said, you have to submit everything that you want to go to the client for a decision by a cut-off time before the meeting, which would then be run by the army. And the deal was that the meeting wouldn't be left until a decision was made. And actually, that's complete. I work in healthcare design predominantly, and that's completely the opposite to the way the NHS normally operates. So it's extremely confronting for them. And there were literally people crying under stairwells, and it was very, very high pressured environment. But I think my observation would be about that is there was 2 things, and one of them was that every single person from every single stakeholder, or the consultants, or the manufacturers, or the people who are buying products from, everybody understood the assignment. So everybody was completely focused on, we have to collaborate to make this a success. And that stripped away a load of stuff that normally happens often in projects where there's lots of, layers of decision making and sort of back covering and logging of everything. And people would get together in a space and make a decision that was the best for the project. You would do that and you would move on. And the understanding was, if there was a worry or a concern with that, you'd collectively work it out, because nobody's got any time to stand around pointing fingers at everybody. And actually, that was an incredible environment to work in.
So collaboration at its best.
Yeah. And trust, I think, high level of trust in each other. And knowing actually that, what each team did was try to assemble the best people from. So a bit like Gillian, the point that Gillian was making, everybody brought the best because there was no time for anything else.
No time for stuff about. Caroline, from a real estate perspective, one of the things that came out in the last few months with these interviews I'm doing is that nowadays the workplace works as a mean to retain and attract talent. And we speak to Gillian about, Gillian is specialized in workplace, so she knows all the inside outs of the trends and things like that. But from a real estate perspective, how do you think that's working?
Well, I think certainly post-COVID and probably learning some of the messages and lessons that Emma's just been referring to, the recognition of workplace being the location that you want to collaborate and have conversations. So if you want to get your head down and do some work, then you might be able to do that at home effectively where you're not distracted. But the real benefit of the office is about being able to bring different people together to have those connections over making a cup of tea or photocopying, that you maybe put different connections together and create an opportunity out of that. So what we've seen both as a business and for our clients is that the emphasis around the quality of the office and the office being able to create places that allow collaboration, working together and getting the best solutions by being in environments that allow you to talk and engage with people. So that's a really positive thing that's come out of all the things we had to go through during lockdown.
Flexible working at its finest.
Yeah,
And
both
collaboration.
in terms of both time, but also I think that sense of allowing people to be able to work, but recognizing it's important to come together some of the time in certain sectors where we need that.
Mm-hmm.
Property is definitely one of them, and I guess designers as well, that we get better solutions by having conversations.
I think there may be sometimes I think there's different interpretations of what flexible working means as well. I don't even think we've got a common language around that, so especially with the talk of hybrid and flexible working, and it's like, what does any of that, do we all interpret it the same way? Sorry.
So, Gillian, you are our workplace design specialist. What are the three main elements that inclusive and attractive workplace must have these days?
I think it needs to have purpose. So it needs to understand what the business does and what the various working parts of the business need from their space or not. And I think, Emma, I think you said earlier, you refer to actually giving people choice, and that is really important. And I think the one thing we found as a design business during COVID, design was harder. Design was harder, collaboration was harder. If you're working on a project, because we carried on working, and if you're working on a project and you're working on a big interior fit out and you've got the door package to do, you kind of need to talk to the guy who's doing the partitions, and you need to talk to the person who's doing the ceilings, and all of these things, they all interconnect. And that, while you have all sorts of online 3D tools that can help that, if you're actually in the same room with that person, it is easier. So, but not all organizations are like that. So I think rather than think, good design definitely attracts returning from COVID. So what my team do is actually understand a client's brief. So we start by asking them questions about what flexible working means for them. At what point are they on their journey and how did they get there? Is it working? Are there things that need to be tweaked? So it's constant. For us, it's about understanding where they're at, how they got there, and what the future could possibly be for them. And what do you need it to do for your business? Well, actually, we really need people to collaborate. So it's creating something that's attractive, something that makes collaboration easy. And it's almost like it facilitates that like seamless collaboration. But you have to recognize too that there's some work styles that is really quite solitary and focused. And everybody has a bit of these different work styles in their day-to-day business or day-to-day tasks. Sarah, do you want me to talk to more about it? So it's understanding what the business is doing, and then you can have design ideas about how you can actually support these activities in the future. And if you've asked the right questions at the start, you can then weave their stories into which then they see and recognize, and they think, well, actually, I was part of that.
So it sounds like actually the workplace design is in itself a way of good leadership, because you nurture the place where people work. You create a nurturing environment for your team to come together.
Yeah. Yeah. And create, don't have too many hard and fast rules about you can't do this or you can't do that. It's like, so giving guidance about how you use spaces, or you kind of need to let people, there's a bit of guidance and a bit of like, find it out for themselves, explore, because you're never going to get it totally right. And it's somebody, maybe you, Emma, talked earlier about, I mean, maybe it was the military example about during COVID. It's like the chips were down and everybody brought their absolute best to that project, and you sounded like it was a really kind of uplifting thing to see and be part of, and feeling that collectively you've achieved something amazing, which is so powerful, and it just makes you feel that actually you're doing a really good job, and it's meaningful for you and your team.
Yeah, it's definitely felt
Emma, you
like
want to
that.
say?
It definitely felt like that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about what you were saying there, Gillian. I know Sarah's not asked me a question, but I think a lot of these things that we're talking about actually amount to culture, don't they?
Yeah.
So if people feel sort of
Yeah.
psychologically safe and supported, and like they're in a place where they want to come into the studio because of how that culture is, and they know they can ask someone for some informal advice or ask somebody for some support, but there's also places to do quiet work and things like that. I think it all just builds upon something that's really powerful,
Yeah.
which we're probably not going to get if everybody was remote working, although remote working is incredibly important for flexibility as well. So and I'm really heartened, and I think since COVID we've seen much more sort of men at work doing the kid drop off and pick up and things like that. So it is all about working out how to be hybrid, but how to really maximize that time, I think, when you're together in the studio.
And I think aligned to that, it's really important to think about the different stages in your career. So I was really conscious, particularly with our graduates, and often, and many of them live in the centre, but don't necessarily have a huge amount of space. So they might have a sort of one bed flat, or they're sharing with people, and actually having both somewhere they can, really good workspace, as opposed to, our sort of extreme partners who might have a garden pod that's beautifully specced out, in the sort of Surrey countryside. The ability and the importance of the graduates and the younger members of the office to be able to come in and experience and listen and hear what the more experienced people are doing. Importantly, when we weren't having as many meetings in person with clients, to actually just listen to them and how they negotiated with people. It's really, for me, and ties with your point, Emma, about culture. So it's really important for the junior members of the team to be able to come into a nurturing environment and to learn whilst they are there in person with different people. And that's a really important, both in terms of, with colleagues within the office, but also with clients as well.
Rebecca looks like you want something to say there.
I've always got something to say. I'm trying not to.
Go for it.
It's really, there's loads of things there that I think, I completely agree with. And it's interesting because I did a podcast not so long ago with an apprentice. He was 19, I think. And it was really interesting because you can see the difference in the way that we approach things. Absolutely. But I think I made that point, or I think he was making the point that we don't need to be in the office. We can do everything that we need to from home, etc., etc. He also made a really great point. I'm digressing a little bit. I will come back. But he made a really great point as well of like, I'm not going to, he said, I'm not going to, kind of put my heart and soul and slog my guts out, the way that I saw my parents do it, because they did it for nothing. They weren't valued, they weren't compensated, and they just ended up burning out. So I've learned a lot, he said, from seeing that happen. But then on the flip side, it was like, but I don't think I need to be in the office. That's not right. He didn't say I didn't think I need to be in the office. It's like they didn't see the value as much in what you just said there in terms of having to learn from our peers, etc. And sometimes it's not always, because the other thing that I always talk to when I'm talking to, I do quite a lot of work with apprentices, and I always say, remember as well that it's really, really important that you are around your peers, your older peers, because you do need to collaborate and learn, etc. But it's a two-way thing, because I think that there are sometimes it's also important for the younger generation to bring their perspective as well, because sometimes we get stuck in our ways, and sometimes we're working in a way that may not be appropriate anymore just because that's the way we've always done it. So we always say to younger people, listen, learn, but don't be afraid to trial things and have conversations as well. So it's a two-way thing. Just as much as we need them in the office to learn from us, we also have got a lot to learn from them too. And I think it's about really ensuring that the younger generation appreciate that as well, I think.
Just on that, I've got a really good example. I spoke to one of our graduates who always has his ear pods in.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I was thinking, well, he's not, listening to what's happening around him. And he was saying, when I'm focused, I always listen to music and that's how I focus. And I was then able to say to some of the other partners who think, oh, look at the young people who are sort of listening to music all the time as a negative thing, that actually there's a little bit of give and take. So the graduates should sometimes not have their ear pods in so they can listen to what's happening and the conversations that are happening, but equally recognizing that that is a way that helps them to be focused on different things. So as you say, Rebecca, it's about communicating and listening and understanding the different ways we do things and recognizing that some things work well for some people and we need to listen and recognize different people's perspectives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To wrap this up, because we've been chatting away for almost 40 minutes, we do a little round table. So Gillian, Caroline, Rebecca, and then I don't know what happened to Emma, but hopefully she'll come back. Talk to yourself when you started the career with the knowledge you've got now. What piece of advice would you give to your younger self entering the built environment?
Me.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked about this before, and it's ask questions if you don't know. No question's a stupid question. And I learned that working at the Glasgow City Council Architects Department in like the 1980s. And the most useful, I shared a phone with my friend Jill, who I'm still really friendly with. She's an architect. And she knew more than me. I was interior designer, she was an architect. She was a great source of knowledge. But we also had clerks of works. So these are time served joiners, plumbers, etc., who basically carried out due diligence on sites, and they were a complete wealth of knowledge. They would explain about how you fix something to something and why this didn't work or why what you'd done was good. So it's just be curious, and no question's a stupid question.
Caroline.
I think it very much aligned to what Gillian's just said. It's that sense of have a go at things. So instead of thinking, oh, I'm not sure that I'll be able to do that, say yes. And I think generally I have followed that rule, but try and get involved in things. Not everything, because you'll burn yourself out, but effectively, rather than thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I'll be really good at that, have a go. And if you fail and you learn from it, but actually say, yes, I'll put my hand up for that. I'll have a go at trying that. And then you'll be exposed to greater opportunities.
Yeah, but then for that, you really need a nurturing environment when you are allowed to try and fail.
Yeah, and also as well, that's really interesting, Caroline. I again, I was doing another panel a few weeks ago, and I think I agree with you. I think that we always need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. However, I think sometimes, so I was interviewing, we were talking about intersectionality and about, so obviously the added layers. And it was this point of feeling that you have to, and I've definitely been there. And that's probably one of the things I wish I knew back then, but of thinking that you've got to always go above and beyond to be seen and to be visible. And I do think that, sometimes when you're in a minority within an organization, you do feel like you've got to constantly go above and beyond to be seen. And you actually do. That's unfortunately, that is the case. So it's finding that balance, because I absolutely agree. I'm constantly, one for saying push yourself out of your comfort zone, but also have boundaries around it as well, so that you don't then do so much just to be seen that you're burning yourself out. Because I've definitely been, guilty of one as well. And that's one of the things that I would say to answer the question that you spoke about. And I remember when I was first, came into my first leadership position, and I just thought that if I worked harder, if I, did more to prove myself, if I out-delivered at every turn, that I'd get rewarded for it. And I didn't. And I realised that there's no way it's going to outwork the system. And, it's great. I mean, I worked in obviously from education. So I was working in the public sector. It's great to see what's happening in the private sector. And it's great to hear some of the great things happening. But unfortunately, there are still environments where, these things are happening. And I just wish back then someone had told me about the invisible barriers that we do face, and that I wasn't the problem, because I thought for a long, long time I was the problem and I had to, outperform. And it's really interesting as well. And sorry, just one other thing to add, and it's going back to what I think we were saying, Gillian, about employ people that are better than you, because great leaders, they create more great leaders, right? And I definitely, so when I think I was in my early 30s, it was only last week, yeah, of course, but I was in my early 30s, and I was going through the recruitment process, and luckily my own recruitment process worked against me, because I was employing the best person for the job was somebody who was better qualified than me. So I was recruiting into an education position. I'd never been a head teacher. We were working at the time with a lot of asylum seekers, a lot of refugees, and I was in Lincolnshire, so it was all relatively new. And I interviewed somebody who'd been a head teacher, who also worked in Tower Hamlets with refugees and asylum seekers, had this wealth of experience and knowledge. And I was interviewing her to be her line manager. And I remember really digging my heels in, was like, no, it's not the right person. She's not the right person. She clearly was the right person. But when I look back now, there was a huge scarcity mindset. I had a scarcity mindset. I thought, no, if she comes in, she's going to take my job. She's going to be better than me. And I'm honest about that, because I see that now for what it was. But it just, I think, really kind of exemplifies your point, Julian, of the whole thing of like, there is a fear. There is still a fear and a scarcity mindset on that. I think we need to be really honest about.
Right, so basically we need to send all leaders to therapy to make sure they fix their self-esteem first.
No.
Well, that's the problem.
I think
Half
that's
of the
something we had
problems
a
of
chat
this
about,
world
isn't it,
are
Sarah?
due to lack of self-esteem.
Yeah.
Because if you're not afraid of
Is it
somebody that is
self-esteem
smarter
or
than you,
is it self?
Oh, that's
well,
yeah.
it depends on the person. If you're talking about
that's-
Trump, his ego.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
Emma,
That's a really fair point too. Ego definitely gets in the way for me back then, definitely. And ego
Well,
is we've
right.
all got ego, haven't we? But it's about recognizing the bias, the unconscious bias, all of that, and kind of transcending that, so to speak.
Sorry, I disappeared. My laptop's ego got in the way of the.
Right, Emma, we were just closing this off with one last question. If you were talking to your younger self, what kind of advice would you give her just before you were entering the built environment and start your career as an architect?
Gosh, that's a big one, isn't it? So I think you've got to be unapologetically yourself without stamping on anybody else. So there's a very careful way to do that. I think I would tell her something I've grown into now that I can do now that I don't think I could do when I was in my young 20s or teens is, have faith in myself and what I'm bringing to the table, and feel able to advocate for myself.
Yeah, but that's something you learn when you're a middle-aged woman going through the perimenopause. It doesn't work for a 20-year-old person.
No, I suppose knowing that. But I would challenge that, because what I would say is I think you do see more young men in their 20s who are less afraid to get involved and share their opinion, and you do see, and I'm generalizing, but you do see women shrinking back more a bit. I think
There's a little bit, and we were talking on, and we don't want to get into it too much, but I think that the point around culture, I think and again, it ties back to that sort of recruit people who are better than you, recognizing particularly around technology, often younger people are much better around technology. So really, when you're trying to make decisions, that making sure that you have got some younger people who can think about things in a slightly different way. So having a different voice around the table and us all listening is really, so they won't have the experience that you have now, Emma, but actually they can bring a different dynamic, which can help you find the right solution.
Completely
for
agree.
a client's
It's
problem.
very important. I do that in teams. I will say, this is how I think we should do it for these reasons, but this is an open discussion where we're collaborating and you guys know stuff that I don't know. So tell me if you think there's a better way to do it. And I might say, brilliant, or I might say, well, actually, if we do that, we're going to lose this, this, and this. But it's co-creating it, isn't it, with all those skills?
Yeah, and everybody actually chipping in.
Yeah.
And contributing.
Making sure
So
that
we're going back to collaboration and communication.
Full circle.
Yep. And sometimes when you're young, like management don't hear you as well, or you don't get that opportunity. I think it's enabling that, just as you
Yeah.
said, Emma, is so important.
That was something that came through as well, Gillian, when I did the podcast with the young apprentice, and he was saying the same thing. He was like, because and I've heard this so many times when I've been mentoring younger people, and I can't wait till I'm 30 because then I'll get taken seriously. So there is that, that is still a thing,
Yeah.
Well, I'm 47 and I'm still not getting serious. Nobody's getting me seriously.
Well, we've all been in that situation where we've had a great idea and no one's listened to it, and then somebody else, I'm not going to say, has had the same idea and it's been taken on board.
Yeah.
I can't imagine any of us have not had that happen.
I just would I externalize those ones. I'm like, oh yes, I actually said that yesterday.
Yeah.
It's
We need more of that. I mean, I was talking to somebody today and she was telling me, she was just saying about how she said that she approaches, it's from the Fire Protection Association, I think, and she works, I think she works in the marketing department or whatever. And she was saying that a lot of times she will approach women because she wants them to contribute to the magazine or whatever, because they're brilliant at what they do. And she really wants them to make the contribution. She says the amount of times they will step back and say, oh no, my male colleague is more experienced, he's been here longer, can you, I want him to do it instead. And she's like, well, no, I've come to you because of you and who you are and your experience. So I think, we need to, what I'm trying to say is, us women that have got the confidence to do that and to stand up and say, I'm going to externalize that, we need to be doing more of that. Does that make sense?
Empowering staff 100%. It's really important.
And encouraging them. Yeah.
Right, ladies, thank you very much. Lots of good stuff in this episode, so can't wait to get it released. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity and lovely to meet you all.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Nice to meet you.